All right. Good morning. I am glad to have you guys join me. Let me get my screen shared here. And we're going to talk about spend a little time again at a high level since we're not in the down in the weeds session. Um, we're going to chat about driving retention and using xAPI to support learning. I really enjoy this session for a couple reasons. First, it always changes, right? So, you give a series of case studies 6 months ago. Half of those are going to be different today. The other thing is that the idea behind this session is really not getting down into the nuts and bolts of how to code the XAPI and send statements, but really what are the things that we can open up as opportunities for students based on the fact that we have this new technology and these new capabilities. So I'm Duncan Welder. I'm super easy to find. So email, Twitter, anything you ever need there. Uh, when I initially started putting this presentation together, the thing uh, that made me think is this quote from Make It Stick back in 2014, where it said people are generally going about learning the wrong ways. It's like, okay, well, why is that? Well, because I think, often take the lowest or the path of least resistance in creating training, and we have get set into a series of ways, and we tend to repeat that same thing over and over unless there's some really distinct or significant driver, something like a high criticality kind of operation. So just from taking a look standpoint there, if you want to drop anything into the chat, what are some of the biggest challenges that you see with traditional instructor-led training? While you're throwing some answers out there, what are the biggest challenges you see with e-learning? I'm gonna slide this guy out of the way so I can actually see um, oh, so I can actually see as I'm working through. So info dumping, student retention, park and bark. I like that. I always talk about chalk and talk, but I never do park and bark. I have to use that now. Uh, I think these are all things that we run into a lot and are pretty common, right? So that low knowledge check interactivity, right? That's the I'm just delivering this information out without getting some feedback coming through, limited hands-on experience, especially in a classroom environment. We can augment that some and in the electronic world. We'll talk about things like simulations in just a few minutes. You have a very dictated pace most of the time. And this is sometimes better in online training, but certainly in a classroom situation, you have the whole time and scheduling commitment thing. You have lack of follow up post event. We'll talk about how important post event follow up is in just a bit, and then a couple things that are not unique to online training, but I hear very often is low SME interactivity and this check the box perception, right? Everybody's got to do their bloodborne pathogens awareness training. Let's get to it, and we'll do this. So if we back up a step from what we're doing now and say, what are the things that we need to provide to students so that they can transfer knowledge. And since we're working with adults, the main thing that I see there is really the context, right? I need to have some way to tie this new information or this new um, skill to my existing foundation of experience. I like to know why this is important for me to learn. So I need to be informed of this. Um, Adults tend to focus on problem solution kind of areas. So if I have a situation that I can put or paint the picture of, do the storytelling behind, how we're going to solve a problem. This always helps in information. And then reinforcement. And this is something I'll talk about a number of times, because I think xAPI gives us a lot of unique opportunities to reinforce training and proper performance, which is really, the key. So we're going to look at 5 different, very brief, high-level case studies, and I'll use very simple content elements, but I do have good references in that actually get down to the code level if you wanted to recreate a lot of these things. So adaptive content, guided evaluation, space learning, active recall, and then we'll talk a little bit about simulation and gamification, and where specifically in the last 2 years I've seen a lot of activity on the xAPI front. So I won't spend a lot of time in these definitions, because this audience probably doesn't need a lot of the background there, but adaptive content is just that. And I'm excited to hear Kristen Torrance's presentation this afternoon about the adaptive content development that she's doing, but content that can change based on a learner's needs or preferences. If you were in Matt and Peter's session a second ago, then they talked about these different APIs within xAPI, and we'll talk about those as well. So I can adapt content based on previous performance, or something about the actor, the agent's demographics, user preferences. So the reason that this works so well or fits so well into xAPI or with xAPI is that the LRS must allow me to both read and write. So if I have, say, in my agent API, I will use actor and agent absolutely interchangeably. So if you have to forgive me on that one, I could store information like, does this person use the narration when they go through a piece of content? Or I might have something stored in that actor API that says, if I have this organizational role, then this is content that can be skipped or omitted out of that piece of learning. And then from our statements, we can go back and I can have one training module, one content module, one AU, go back and look at a previous module that I've completed by reading from the LRS. And it might see things like, what are the objectives that were mastered? Are there any competency gaps? This will allow me to modify inside the application, or inside the content, how I want it to behave. I've got a very, very simple example here. And let me switch over. That's not it. That's just the outline for the day. So here I've got a CMI5 course, and it's broken up into a few different AUs. So I'm going to hit resume here, and this is truly just an animal with a couple questions. So I've got an e-learning module, a CMI5 course, another e-learning module, and then I've got a third there. So if I run this first content module, what it's going to do, it always makes me happy since it's in CMI5, it's going to open up inside the same window and I don't have to deal with the pop-up there. But I could answer this cleverly titled training part 1 and say, what's my favorite Lamborghini model? I am not the car guy, so I have to defer to my partner on these. So I'm going to hit return back to the LMS. Once I've submitted it, it's going through, reading that return URL, and it will repopulate the LMS in the background there. And let me take that next piece of content. He says confidently, with 87 windows open. All right, so here we are. And as soon as I can get this guy to paint for me here, I'm going to open up that second module, right? So I've gone through the first one. I'm going to open the second module, hit run, and it will show a picture of the car I selected, right? And I can exit, go back to the LMS, and then if my if I wanted to change, make an update there. As soon as I get back, I can, being brutalized by the internet, I could go through and pick another example. How about this Aventador? And I'll hit submit, and now if I go back, as you would suspect, but you don't have to trust me, I can actually show you. I have, when I launch that second piece of content, it will have updated the image. That's my preference from the first. So when you think about content that builds on itself, you have a resume writing course, and I may have one piece of content that allows me to put in maybe my uh, personal information and my work history. And then I have another module where I may go through and update things like my objectives. They can still read that content from the LRS and move it forward with me. So just like in this example, when I relaunched this uh, second module, then it shows me the picture of the Aventador. This is my level of understanding of these cars. So I'm going to bounce back there. And again, I really appreciated reading the schedule because I know there are more in-depth sessions of adaptive content development later, but I really just wanted to kind of stimulate your thoughts there on what are some of those possibilities. Uh, the other, and this is a great example because it really was one of those. I was watching Judy Katz, who's presenting today and is in the on the panel this afternoon, demo Pebble Pro, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is a fantastic opportunity to use xAPI. Now, Pebble Pro is fully xAPI enabled already. So the nice thing there was all we had to do was point it at my LRS and I could start catching statements there. Uh, but guided evaluation is where a learner can synthesize some kind of answer and give it back and receive feedback from an expert. So instead of just a multiple choice question where I, you know, pick what is the most appropriate answer. In this case, I might be able to go through and say, upload an image or write out a long answer, have an instructor graded lesson versus using it just for feedback, because again, all of these things are enabled with xAPI as long as I have the right credentials. And I'll show you doing that, but I wanted to kind of show the process flow first. So there's content that lives in Pebble Pro. It's sending records to the Learning Record Store, and it's reading data from the Learning Record Store as well. So it can be displayed in some cases to other students, sometimes just privately. And then the LMS is going in and it's reading from the LRS and allowing an instructor to grade an answer and provide feedback back to the LRS. So taking a look at an example here, I am going to bounce over to Pebble Pro. I am not an expert in authoring and working in this platform, so forgive my very crude example here. But what I wanted to show you is, one, I have the ability to go in and put in essentially long answer or open-ended questions. I'll also show I have the ability to upload images as well. The use case that I always think of here is restaurants, and a number of restaurants, if you've worked in that industry, they have timing for things. So what happens is a manager is uploading pictures from the time they're starting prep in the morning until the time they close at night to to a district manager that okays the timing and the way things are presented. I think, gosh, they should do that with cell phones all over, but they don't ever capture that information. I always have thought how valuable that would be. So if anybody has an in on the restaurant industry, you guys let me know. So here, write your own xAPI statement. So I'll say, Kathy cleaned clams, what you'll want, and then I can share that. Um, so I get the information there. I'm going to go on to the next page here, and I have the ability to, it says upload a screenshot of some LRS data. I'll just drag and drop and submit that answer. You see the last one I did was my dog. This is a deadhead picture. Um, but now the real key is I can go through and back in the LMS, I can see those questions. I'm going to blow that guy up for you just a bit because it's got a lot of information on that screen. I don't want to hide it too much. So, write your own xAPI statement in subject verb object form. Well, if I click there, I can see all of the people that have responded and their responses. And from there, I can go in and grade those and provide feedback. So here I have, Justin said, you know, Brenda Brenda bakes brie. Mark made marmalade, and I can go through, and if I want, I can mark those correct or incorrect. Um, all those things will update the LMS. So the idea of having a field evaluation for a student where they actually get feedback and can help shape performance without having an instructor that's standing right there. The other thing that this reminded me of, or I thought about when I ran into it. I recently visited the optometrist, and they work exclusively remotely at this office. So there's a technician that gets 10 people into rooms, and the same optometrist just bounces between us, giving the test, and it uh, spits out your results, your prescription. I thought, gosh, we ought to be able to do this on the learning side of the world. We should be capturing that data. So, pardon me. Oh, you know what? Actually, before I bounce out there, I was going to just take a look. Let's say I may need to get some more statements there, and I'm going to move this guy back down to a more reasonable size. But you can see all these things have been hitting the LRS. This is just a statement viewer. So here I picked my, picked my model. Here's that intro to xAPI course, and let's say where's a good example here where it might say, I accessed the content, I paged through. I'm sure there's uploads in here as well. So if we want to go through and take a look at any of that content, we can go in and do it and see all of the detail behind it. So that the third example that I wanted to chat about is really around delivering training, and this is not something that's a magical new thought, right? Spaced learning is just that. It's the delivery of small repetitive pieces of learning, bits of information over time, and each of those new opportunities to deliver training reinforces previous learning. So you build on all that new information, and over years now, it's been proven to improve retention. Um, uh, so the more frequently I am reminded, updated about that content after I receive that training, then the more um, it sticks, right? So this is just an example of the Ebbington curve for for forgetting. So the forgetting curve, you'll hear a lot where you have this line that goes down. I'm given all this new information, and it just drains out of my mind as other things come through. But if I can have an intervention, whatever, a couple days later, a week later, some of these things, there is research on the amount of time you'd need. But again, if I can shift from forgetting in this trajectory to forgetting like this or forgetting like this, or I keep practicing and practicing until I reduce as much of the forgetting as possible, then I'm better, right? So space learning definitely fits well into the micro learning arena. Micro learning is not necessarily space learning. I could do space learning other ways, but in this case, this is just an example where we used um, xAPI content. This was developed in RISE and sent out an email text link a text link to let someone launch that content. Um, One of the the slides I always love to use, and I'll continue to share it probably the rest of my life, is this activities contributing to learning. And this is from a training magazine survey. I'm not sure the year, but they talked about the amount of value in pre-planning a learning event. Setting expectations, self-assessment, pre-work, the learning event itself, it's online class or a webinar, whatever, but then the post-learning activities and how much they contribute to retention. So 50% of uh, the value essentially of training we get through, or we can build based on that post class, those post class activities, which is always funny when you look at this. There are other elements of it that said typical investment is 10% for pre-learning, 85% is spent on the event, and then we just barely um, drop 5% out for post-learning activities, even though they are probably the most valuable there. And there's a reason why we don't do it. One is tracking. It's difficult uh, to have everyone on a different schedule, right? If this course needs to go out on this day and then 5 days later, I get it because I passed it on the first day and someone else took it 3 days later. So they are now at 8 days out. So that whole tracking and the management development effort of splitting out content. And then, of course, interoperability. And that's really one of the main reasons we're here, right? Is driving interoperability between these different data elements. So xAPI helps put into the interoperability challenge, and it does that because we can do tracking outside the LMS. Right? I didn't know these people are going to get a text message. They're never going to log into to a LMS. They're going to go straight into content. Um, we can watch someone's behavior through xAPI, so I know when that next content element needs to come out. We can adapt learning to the user. So if they need to repeat something, we can do that. And the process is pretty simple. What we did was the credentialing and delivery management um, of the space learning applications is our content has to be xAPI or CMI5. Now, there are some abilities to send and launch SCORM from a link, but they're not necessarily interoperable where the CMI5 or xAPI package is. We get our actor because we don't want somebody to log in on a phone. We bypass the login altogether. So we get our actor with an embedded token that the LMS sticks into the link. And then all the scheduling happens again through that LMS or just a learning experience platform. And then notifications come out via SMS or email. So then we do the same thing with follow-up. So the LMS sends this link out to a mailer program that has an embedded uh, token that identifies my actor. The learner gets that text message. They interact with that content that is reading and writing both from the LRS, and then the LMS is just there waiting for a response, right? So just an easy cycle there, but a nice, convenient way to work xAPI into an existing environment. And there are tons of other ways to support building information over time, right? This is what homework's for, and surveys and peer-to-peer teaching. But I thought this was a great opportunity on the xAPI side. So what we did is built built is probably too strong. What we did is we adapted from our full learning management system just a space learning platform, because not everyone may need this functionality all the time. So basically courses, if I open one up here, I've got a course that's what is space learning, benefits of practice, course evaluation, and then I get a completion certificate. They're set apart by days. So I take the space learning content, and I pass it. The next day I get the second module. The next day I get the third module. The completion certificate comes immediately after I've completed everything. I assign students to the session, and then I just watch the activity, because this will show on a daily basis the number of emails sent and text sent. It will show the number of completions by text, and then the number of completions by email, and then has a line for just those things that are launched without necessarily being completed. And you can change date ranges and things there. But anecdotally, what I found is, in doing this and removing the LMS burden, and removing the need to log in, and the easy ability to say, I'm going to let this email sit and never go back to it. I don't see people do as much on the text side, so we actually get a pretty significant increase in completions by sending out that content by text versus email. So two other very quick examples, and I'm keeping close watch on the time as well, so we have the opportunity for questions there. But active recall is really just the testing effect. We've probably all used it at some point. I live in a town with a big medical college, so anytime I walk into a place, there are people flipping over drug cards, studying for pharmacology stuff, and they're all using essentially flashcards. So again, nothing that's particularly high tech. We were probably all making flashcards out of index cards in grade school. But if I have an existing resource, for instance, a question bank inside my my system, whatever environment that is, I'm going to go to my historical training here just to make it easy to find. But I can go through and use and repurpose those same test questions if I want to operate as flashcards. So here, if I click in this flashcard link, and I'll be able to see if I have any flashcards loaded on this one. Oh no. Well, anyway, I won't waste your time there, since those all look like they are the probably the same module. But again, have the ability to go through and take a look at flashcards. Again, this is one of those that should be an easy win, because you have the content already there so often. And there's also an existing profile. So within the GitHub for the ADL, you can go through and you can pull down the profile for flashcards. And I'm sure there are opportunities, like with all the profiles, to have some kind of increase or improvement over time. But for right now, there's a good base that's already existing. Uh, that very similar to using some of the other libraries we'll talk about with Unity in 1 second. And apologies for not finding my example there. Um, so the last case study that I wanted to talk about, and it's one that we hadn't really been uh, particularly involved with. Uh, we work with a lot of clients that do simulation and large scale simulation in things like power generation and um, uh, oil production and things like this. But they've largely been kept separate from the LMS. I mean, they're collecting tons and tons of data, and you may collect or record just a completion of a particular scenario in the LMS, but for the most part, those are standalone, dedicated machines, sometimes with their own hardware. But there's huge benefit, right? It gives you a safe environment where you can learn. It gives me the ability to learn from my mistakes and push my limits, try things. In a lot of situations, um, we can use simulations to improve teamwork. And I know the same is true of online gaming. I don't have the depth of knowledge there to get Peter Gunter back in to talk about that. But a lot of these simulations we'll have running in classrooms, or our clients will have running in classrooms where people have uh, radios to talk to one another, and now more recently they're doing these completely online, so the people that are working in the same scenario aren't even in the same location, but I may have an operator that says, hey, you need to close this valve, and an outside person say, all right, I can't find that valve. So value in being able to work together. And the real key for simulation for me is instilling good confidence that I can do this job. I was at the ITSEC conference last week, which is military simulation, and one of the guys that was presenting from the Air Force said that when he was growing up, he said you put a poster of the instrument panel on the wall in front of you, and you sat in a chair, and you went through your exercises, kind of watching, mentally the day before. And said now they have such good fidelity in the simulators. So what happens on your checkout flight, your initial flight, when you take off with another pilot, you go out, you do whatever you need to do and get back. And he said the number of times they will get back now and the training pilot hasn't said a word certainly makes a good argument for simulation. Um, One of the very simple ones that we had was a group that said, hey, we need to have all of our people qualify on fire extinguisher training. We've got a group that will set up the simulation. We need to know how to get it back into the LMS. Well, what we did, because this wasn't in our traditional bailiwick either, is went out to learnunity.com. So let's see if I could do this without the sound coming on, because there's very exciting background music now. But I'm going to say Duncan, Welder, and go through, and I'm going to hit start. I am old, so I'm going to use my old school mouse or old school joystick here because I'm spastic trying to play this game with a mouse and equally spastic with the joystick, I suppose. But if I go through and I just use this, picked up those 12 balls, you can see the count at the top. And what it's done is we just picked up, this was a project that was available as a free learning item on the Learn Unity site, but went in and used the uh, GBLX API library to update uh, the the game so that it would send statements. So this says it has sent a statement now, and if you really want me to embarrass myself, I'm going to try to do this next level. If I'm just horrid at it, I will pass off and we'll just skip that exercise. We'll go look at statements instead. But here, if I'm capable, well, that's not the way I wanted to go, clearly. And one more, because who was it was Peter that was just talking about the leaderboard. So what you see up in the top corners, you have 3 statements that have been sent. My total time, I can look at results. What that's going to do is going to go out and it's going to pull up the leaderboard there. Arch is very good at this game. So when I go back through and take a look at my LRS, I'm going to refresh this guy since I've been sitting here. Oh. Oh, there we go. All right. Oh, so okay. So I haven't hit the display here yet. So I'm still back at now. It's your turn going through the content module where I uploaded the uh, LRS screenshot. Let me see if we're refreshed now. That doesn't look like it. But if I go, let me go bounce out a page here. Here's that series of statements for the rollerball game. So I got it completed, level 1. I satisfied the game and all of the information. Oh, this was the earlier one, the Samuel Smith that was going through that we saw on the screen there. So again, all of this really created based on free samples of Unity exercises, and all that's been captured now in a Learning Solutions article, as well as a blog that gets you down into the weeds if you really want to start plugging in your own xAPI into Unity games or simulations. So with that, so I think the things that we really have as our challenge is what's the inventory of our current tools, what's their status. And George's session earlier, he was talking about some of the advancements that Adobe's made recently with their xAPI and CMI5 support. What other tools are in our toolbox that we could leverage there. Do things like track xAPI inside forums and threaded discussion groups. Those already existed. We just added that functionality in. What are the opportunities? What's the impact, right? I mentioned that, check the box bloodborne pathogens awareness training that everyone does earlier. And the reality of it is that's probably not your highest impact training for making a giant, technological intervention. It could be, different situations. But um, what's the culture and infrastructure? The um, the, the group that we originally developed the space learning platform for um, initially said all of their people had company issued smartphones and would be able to take the training. When you find out is, there's out of 6,000 people, there's about 600 that didn't. So we had to make sure that we could get that same content to them through a email message. What's your data strategy and governance? And this is something I talk about a lot is, have good plans for how you're going to write data or what data you're going to allow into your LRS. So if you're writing these statements, what should they look like to you? Is their existing profile to follow? But again, a lot of that is probably uh, things that you've been working on, because there are so many discussions around the profiles, including the one this afternoon for the Pebble profile. And then finally, evaluate, update programs. Don't let things get stagnant, because we always want to keep uh, our eyes and our focus on our learners. So I have a series of resources here. I got the 5 minutes message some time ago. So I think we probably have a bit of time for question and answer. If there's anything, I have not been faithful to um, watching the chat, but I will stop sharing here and see if there's anything that I can answer. Oh, okay. I see one there from Aaron. Can an LRS pull in data from an LMS about a user? Um, I guess the answer is yes, and you might not want to. What we do a lot of times, because we'll marry um, LRS data and LMS data together for things like filters, right? I want to see uh, test results by a particular supervisor, so I need to filter out anyone who's not one of their direct reports. The LRS, at least in our case, doesn't have that data, right? We don't store it there. The LMS already has it. So if I have a student ID, some kind of identifier for the actor that comes um, out of the LRS, then I will match it up with the SQL data from the LMS. So one example is I've got a group that's using Microsoft Power BI to create dashboards that are unique to their business. And what they do is they take a feed of data from the LRS daily using Flow, and they'll take a feed from the LMS, and then they take a feed from their safety system. And they combine all those for one set of dashboards, but they're using kind of an intermediate say intermediate database is probably an overstatement, but they're not pulling exclusively from the LRS data. Oh, it looks like Andrew Downs answered probably much more eloquently than I was about the same thing there. Yeah, so combined with xAPI data for reporting, good. Um, oh, is the guided evaluation. Guided evaluation is really more around having more open-ended questions, or something where I might need to show a process where, if I'm changing the tire on a car, I video record myself doing it and upload that to an instructor that can give me feedback, better kind of honing that performance. Um, I don't I don't know how much that will be covered in one of the later sessions, but I can find out. I know there's some overlap, but I don't want to steal thunder from the Pebble Pro folks. All right. Well, I show 11:45. So I appreciate it. I am going to be around all day, so holler at me if you don't have the opportunity. I am easy to find. All right. Thank you.